everybody, how's it going? This is part 3 of reading of my novel on His Majesty's Secret Service, which, from the reviews I'm hearing on the new James Bond movie Skyfall, I think my book is better. Anyway, here we go. So I picked off where we left off. "Hey," Jane yelled. The girl didn't start or turn quickly around. Her steps faltered and stopped. And then, as a small wave creamed in and died at her feet, well, that's nice, she turned slowly and stood squarely facing the woman. Her eyes, puffed and wet with tears, looked past her. Then they met hers. She said dully, "What is it? What do you want?" "I was worried about you. What are you doing out there? What's the matter?" The girl looked past her again. Her clenched right hand went up to her mouth. She said something incomprehensible from behind it. Then a voice from very close behind the woman said softly, silkily, "Don't move or you get it in the back of the knee." Jane's instincts kicked in and she whirled around into a crouch, her gun hand inside her coat. The steady silver eyes of the two automatics sneered at her. She slowly straightened herself, outnumbered, not for the first time. She dropped her hand to her side, and the held breath came out between her teeth in a quiet hiss. The two deadpan professional faces told her even more than the two silver eyes of the guns. They had no tension, no excitement. They were Woodcock's men, all right. Now the rage began to rise in Jane. Were they the ones who had killed her sweet Thomas, her husband? She could feel the mercury of her blood rising. The thin half-smiles were relaxed, contented. The eyes were not even wary. They were almost bored. She had looked into such faces many times before. This was routine. These men were killers, pro-killers. She guessed they were working for Woodcock, but she didn't know what this was all about. On the theory that worry is a divided dividend paid to disaster before it's due, she consciously relaxed her muscles and emptied her mind of questions. She stood and waited. "Position your hands behind your neck." The silky, patient voice was from the south, from the Mediterranean. It fitted with the men's faces, tough-skinned, widely pored, yellow-brown. Marseille, perhaps, or Italian. The Mafia? The faces belonged to good secret police or tough crooks. Her Secret Service mind ticked and whirred, selecting cards like an iPad. What enemy had she got in these areas? Might it be Klofeld? Had the hare turned upon the hound? When the odds are hopeless, when all seems to be lost, then is the time to be calm, to make a show of authority, at least of indifference. Jane smiled into the eyes of the man who had spoken. "I don't think your mother would like to know what you're doing this evening," she said to him. "You're a Catholic? So I will do as you ask." The man's eyes glittered. "Touché." She clasped her hands behind her head. The man stood aside so as to have a clear field of fire while his number 2 removed her pistol, the Glock, from the soft leather holster behind her trouser belt, and ran expert hands down her sides, down her arms to the wrists, and down the inside of her thighs. He paused there for a moment, and she sneered down at him, her eyes saying, "Don't even think about it." The number 2 stood back, pocketed the Glock, and again took out his own gun. She glanced over her shoulder. The girl had said nothing, expressed neither surprise nor alarm. Now she was standing with her back to the group, looking out to sea, apparently relaxed, unconcerned. What in God's name was it all about, she thought to herself. Had she been used as bait, but for whom? And now what? Was she to be executed, her body left lying to be rolled back inshore by the tide? It seemed her only solution. If it was a question of some kind of deal, the 4 of them could not just walk back across the mile of sand to town and politely say goodbyes on the promenade steps. No, this was the terminal point. Or was it? From the north, through the deep indigo dusk, came the fast rattling hum of an outboard. And as Jane watched, the cream of a thick bow wave showed, and then the blunt outline of one of the bombard rescue craft, the flat-bottomed, inflatable rubber boats with a single Johnson engine in the flattened stern. So they had been spotted. By the Coast Guard, perhaps? And here was rescue. By God, she'd roast these 2 thugs when they got to the harbor police at the port. But what story would she tell about the girl? She turned back to face the men. At once she knew the worst. They had rolled their trousers up their knees and were waiting, composedly, their shoes in one hand and their guns in the other. This was no rescue. It was just part of the ride. Oh well. Paying no attention to the men, she bent down, rolled up her trousers as they had done, and in the process of fumbling with her socks and shoes, palmed one of her heel knives, and half turning towards the boat that had now grounded in the shallows, transferred it to her right-hand trouser pocket. No words were exchanged. The girl climbed aboard first, then Jane, she, the grieving woman, and lastly the 2 men who helped the engine with the final shove on the stern. The boatman, who looked like any other African deep-sea fisherman, whirled the blunt nose of the bombard round, changed gears to forward, and they were off northwards through the buffering waves, while the dark hair of the girl streamed back and softly whipped Jane's cheek. "You're going to catch cold," Jane said to the girl. "Here, take my coat." She slipped her coat off. She held out a hand to help her put it on her. In the process her hand found the woman's and pressed it. She edged closer to her. She felt her body respond. She glanced at the two men. They sat hunched against the wind, their hands in their pockets, watchful, but somehow uninterested. Behind them the necklace of lights that was Burkane receded swiftly until it was only a golden glow on the horizon. Her right hand felt for the comforting knife in her pocket and ran her thumb across the razor-sharp blade. While she wondered how and when she might have a chance to use it, the rest of her mind ran back over the previous 24 hours and panned them for the gold dust of hope. Then the sound of sirens struck the dead night air. She could descry not far off the flashing lights and hold the bullhorn. "Stop! Police!" Now, Jane thought to herself, now is the time. She threw the young girl down, out of harm's way, into the bottom of the boat. She struck out with her knife and cut into the first thug. He fell back. The driver took no notice. She then dodged a blow from the second thug, struck out and caught him deeply in the arm. He fell also. Struggling to lift the young girl, she threw her out of the boat and dove in after her. When the police boat pulled up beside them, the other boat was long gone, too fast for a municipal craft to catch. "Thank you," said the young woman, and clung with all her being. As Jane climbed into the boat after the young girl, one of the policemen said, "We have been looking for you all night, Commander."